The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users, on demand on iTunes and on YouTube, and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you are encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated into an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. Welcome to the show. Well, you know, we've discussed the issue of immigration and illegal immigration on this show in the past. And we always try to take a compassionate view to issues. For example, we kind of took the side of the two border patrol officers who were incarcerated for shooting a fleeing felon who happened to be an illegal immigrant. Didn't think that was right. We took the side of a family in Los Angeles whose son was murdered by an illegal immigrant who had been previously arrested on criminal charges but then was not detained. These are the kind of people who deserve detention. But what about a family that comes into the country, overstays its visa, or comes in without one? A family, not just the husband or the father, a family. What are you going to do with the children? What are you going to do with the mothers? I mean, people who have not committed any criminal act but are in the country, to use the term, illegally or undocumented. What are you going to do with them? What kind of housing would you think that we would put these women and children in? Would you think a medium security prison outside of Austin, Texas, surrounded by barbed wire? Would you think that? Would you think that we would take children and force them to wear prison uniforms? Would you think that? They don't any longer because the ACLU stepped in and sued. There was a consent agreement, and they agree. By the way, the United States government doesn't run this facility. It's a private enterprise that runs it on behalf of the U.S. government, although ultimately the government is responsible. How can that happen in the United States of America? How can that happen? Well, it is happening. And joining us to discuss this issue of immigrant family detention is Bob Libal. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. He is the coordinator of Grassroots Leadership's campaign to end immigrant family detention. Grassroots Leadership is a 28-year-old Southern-based social justice organization. And I guess first let me welcome you, Bob Libal, to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com, and tell me, how is it possible that women and children who have not even been charged with any crime are being held in prison-like conditions here in the United States?
Well, thanks for having me, Gary. I think that's the question that a lot of us asked when we first found out about the Hutto Detention Center, which the Hutto Detention Center is right outside of Austin, where I live, and it was a former medium security prison holding adult people convicted of crimes, and it reopened in the spring of 2006, and for a while it kind of flew under the radar, but then we and many other organizations started getting calls. We started hearing stories of pregnant women who were seeking asylum in the United States who had two children who were being held at Hutto for months on end. Their kids were being kept in very much prison-like conditions where they were wearing prison garb, where they were put under lockdown several times a day to do a prison count. It was very much treated as a prison-like facility. And so the official explanation for this policy is that at the end of the so-called catch-and-release policy in 2006, where mostly non-Mexican immigrants who were apprehended at the border were released on their own recognizance to appear at immigration court. That policy was ended in 2006, and a policy of catch and detain was implemented. And because of this policy, instead of dealing with people on an individual basis, they started to detain virtually everyone who was caught at the border until their immigration case was completely resolved. And that's how we got to the point where you have a situation where you have mothers and children in a former medium security prison operated by the largest private prison corporation in the world, Corrections Corporation of America.
And as I understand it, before the ACLU consent decree, it was such that the women and the children didn't even have privacy when they went to the facilities, to use the facilities, and they resolved it by putting blankets or some kind of cloth around the privies so that they would get a degree of privacy?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the conditions, by all accounts, when the facility opened, were appalling. I've never been in the cell area of Hutto. I visited people who are detained there, but by all accounts, it was an appalling condition. It was prison-like in every sense of the word. Kids were losing weight, were traumatized. I've spoken to 7-year-old girls who are out on the playground saying things like, "Mommy, was that kid in jail too?" I mean, it's a pretty traumatizing situation when you have children and young children at that who are incarcerated in a facility like Hutto.
And I understand some of the children are mentally abused by the guards. They're told that if your mommy lies about a question we might ask them, we might take mommy away from you, and you'll be alone here in the prison.
Yeah, I mean, especially before the lawsuit settlement, we certainly heard stories of the threats of separation as a disciplinary technique by the guards at the facility. Since the settlement, I think that things have improved at the facility. We still think it's a completely inappropriate thing to do for immigrant families, especially those with small children. But we do think that some of those situations have improved. However, after the settlement, there was a case where not just threatened, but a mother was taken from her child and sent for 4 days to another detention facility while her child was left alone. Her little child, I believe they were 7 or 8 years old, was left alone at Hutto under the supervision of private prison correctional officers and immigration agents. So certainly there are still concerns about conditions, and then I think also, more importantly, concerns about why in the United States, when there are effective alternatives to detention, are we continuing this policy of family detention?
And I want to talk to you about these alternative opportunities to detain people. I know that the economy in Texas